I mean, it's open, yeah.
Like
Actively bleeding, yes.
access open or just
It's just leaking. That might be a better word for it.
All right. Y'all ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Cool. And hello, everybody. And we're back here with the Slapping Meat Wrestling podcast and with the much awaited segment asked for by our community here in the casual wrestling community Discord page. To bring on my special guest from the Junkyard podcast, Junkyard Jimmy, Junkyard James. Thanks for the welcome here. Disrespectful ass motherfucker. But not just that. We're not just gonna have one special guest. We're gonna bring my friend in here, who also leans more to the hardcore AEW side of the spectrum. That is Cody, Commander K-Dog, fresh off a happy week of being a Commanders fan for the happiest they've ever been. How you guys doing?
I'm still drinking water from the hangover from the past weekend, so still catching up, but we're doing all good over here.
All right, so before we get into these questions, I got to set up why we're doing this. What's the purpose of me? You know, I make a podcast for casual fans. Why would I do this interview? Well, first off, it's because the community asked me to. But second, I believe we should stretch across the separation, the divide of the fan base and share opinions with each other. But James, you've been very outspoken in the last couple episodes of your show, calling out the casual wrestling community. And I just want to make it well known at the beginning of this interview, our disagreement, at least this is how I feel about it, our disagreement isn't saying that we dislike you as a person or as a fan, or that your opinion isn't allowed, but more so we just disagree with the opinion because, quite honestly, it's stupid. At least it's how I feel. But this started back when we started to critique Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay's match at Forbidden Door. We called the Tiger Driver dangerous and essentially said that it shouldn't be completed, which didn't get taken well by what we would call the IWC, the hardcore fans who James would essentially be a part of. And he started to critique our podcast. And well, now we're here because the community they have some questions for you. I had them gather up some questions. You guys know the questions beforehand. With that going in, let's start the conversation on a light note. First question, do you like the term mark? And do you think you are a mark? Y'all can answer it, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go.
You go, yeah, that's fine.
The term mark, I think we have to use it in its proper context within the industry. So, in its context in today's term, no, I don't like the way that people use the term mark. Because if you understand what a mark truly was back in the 70s, 80s, a mark was a planted fan who knew the outcome of the match, paid for by the company, and they were there to essentially make the heel get some sort of heat. So if we're using mark in its correct term, then sure, it's a fine term to use. But in that context, no, I don't think I'm a mark because I don't have backstage knowledge of what's going on in the company. I'm just a wrestling fan, not a mark. I have my own wrestling opinions. So if we're using it properly, then yes, let's use the term. But not every fan who has a podcast or some sort of liking or opinion on wrestling is a mark. They're just wrestling fans with opinions.
Cody?
So I mostly agree there with James. I think that us wrestling fans have turned into smarks and think that we just know everything. And I think that it, like James said, when it was an insider term in the industry, and I guess maybe I don't know this, so this is a preface. I don't know, but I would assume maybe somebody like a Wade Keller or Dave Meltzer or something like that may have brought that term over into an everyday societal term for general wrestling fans. So the insider stuff now got outsider stuff, and now it was well known and it was a common term. And I don't like that because, like James said, we're not in the industry. We don't know the backstage politics stuff. We don't know that stuff. I mean, to me, it is what it is. I feel like it's so overused now, and people. When I think of a mark, I think somebody just means that you're a homer for, not a homo, a homer for a. I want to make sure that I clarify what I said. Homer. Uh, you're a homer for WWE or AEW or whatever. So, but I don't hear people say that they're a mark for Star Wars. I don't hear people say they're a mark for DC or Marvel. Just say you're a lifelong wrestling fan. You love wrestling. You like watching it. You love watching it. You like what you like. You don't like what you like, and that's all it is. Just because you prefer AEW doesn't mean you're a mark for AEW. I guess in a way it is, but at the same time, you just prefer AEW. So
Okay.
that's kind of
So when I was prepping you guys, I did tell you I was going to have follow-up questions that weren't on the list. So here's the first one, because there's a bigger question that this comes out of, and you guys sort of insinuated this whole point of, the term mark is an insider term. And the bigger question is, James has said this before, where he's insinuated that if you're not part of the industry, you don't have a right to use the industry's terminology, or you don't have the right to sort of critique those in the industry. Is this an opinion that you guys actually believe in? If so, why? And then, because to me, I think as fans, we should be able to call out when something bad happens. For example, I mean, I've even seen people take it as far to say that botches don't exist, that there are mistakes that happen which is true. There are mistakes that happen in live filming, but those are literally that's literally the definition of botch. And so there's been wrestlers on TikTok who work indies who say if you've never strapped up the boots, you can't critique anyone who has. So what's your opinions on that?
I'll go first. That's such a that's a tough one to answer, just because you're going to get the guys and gals who are in the industry that are going to feel that way. And to an extent, they are right. If you've never taken a bump, if you've never ran the ropes, laced up their boots, you don't respect it. You truly don't. Um, as a fan, yes, you should dislike what you want to dislike, like what you like. It's part of everyday society freedoms we have. Say what you want to say, like what you like, don't like, or don't like what you don't like. But when it comes to botches, we make fun of it, and it is a sore spot whenever you're watching a good match or a good program and something like that, and something unfortunate happens. Um, I don't look at it and try to point fun and say, "Oh, look how this person is such a crappy wrestler, they botched," or um, if it's not something I'm going to point out when it happens. I'm going to be like to myself, "Oh, that sucks. It was a botch," and try to move on past it. I've only partaken in a training thing for one day for a paper I wrote in college. So I have taken a bump, but I have not wrestled, and I don't know exactly all that they go through. I know it's a lot. So I have like the teeniest amount of respect for them, because of not that I don't respect them, but I've taken a bump. It hurts. It sucks. But I've not been in their shoes where I've had a full blown match, nothing like that. So I can only imagine how they feel when they mess up, and to see fans like point out to them that they messed up, and then they, it would irk me too. But at the same time, it is what it is. It happens.
Yeah. Well, here's my take on it. You can. I have two examples I want to use. So let's go back to this Kenny Omega thing that kind of started this whole supposed controversy. The point of me making, using Kenny Omega's match as an example was that even in the beginning wasn't to like criticize a whole community or that wasn't the point, but it was to state overall in general, or like in general terms, you can disagree with them using that move. My entire point was, if you haven't taken that move, or if you don't understand why that move is so important to the wrestlers, you can't go there and criticize their style of wrestling. And I'll point out a WWE example. People have like bullied Ridge Holland to deleting his Twitter account. One, because he broke Big E's neck, and then he injured one of Pretty Deadly's members a couple weeks ago. That I don't think that's right, because injuries happen in the industry. It's a part of the show. Sometimes they do happen, as unfortunate as it is. But to put blame and make this one guy feel like he's a shitty wrestler because he, unfortunately was a part of the match where someone got hurt, there's no part in that, I think, in wrestling. You can say, well, X and Y botched this, or they shouldn't use this move, or this, that, and the other. But to go to the point to criticize the talent level of a wrestler because of something that they do and they've gotten seemingly approved from producers and trainers and coaches, when you're not in the industry, that's where I have a problem with it. Sure, go on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, go on Facebook, go on TikTok, go on your podcast, share whatever opinions you want. But I feel like as a fan, our commentary should stop at the product and not the people behind the product. If you disagree with the booking, you can criticize that. If you disagree with a move being used, be free to criticize that. My biggest problem is when people say that Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay and other wrestlers, because they decide to use these highly elevated moves, are dangerous, are careless. They don't care about the product. They don't care about their health. They don't care. We don't know that. And to use terms of that magnitude without really any backstage knowledge of why they're doing the move or what steps were involved in them getting that move to be approved, I don't think it's fair criticism. You can criticize the usage of the move, but let's not criticize the wrestlers themselves when we haven't worked in the industry.
Okay, so the last thing I'll do is, on this sort of idea, this has been a question that we've been sort of been talking about since Kenny Omega took the move. And this is something I want to ask you, because you're defending the use of the move. If you were a wrestler, would you take it? Would you allow someone to drop you on your head? If I came over there today and said, let me tombstone you or tiger drive you, would you take the move?
In the physical condition that I'm in now, I don't think I could take the move. So no, I wouldn't let no one do it to me because I couldn't take the bump. You have to know your limits. Obviously, Kenny Omega feels he's in a physical condition that he can take the bump. Obviously, he trusts Will Ospreay enough, and they've done it, dozens of other times. They've had, 2 matches this year, and I think they've wrestled prior to AEW being a thing as well. So they have that trust and chemistry to put these bumps together. Would I trust you to give me a tombstone? No, because we're both untrained, people. We don't have the ability, the training involved to take that spot.
But hypothetically, if we were trained wrestlers and we've taken the move before. Would you agree to a bump to be dropped on your head?
If it was me if I was trained and in a physical condition that I feel like I could take the bump, sure. If I feel like it helps the story of the match, surely. I'm not here saying Kenny Omega should take a Tiger Driver every single match, and he's not going to. But occasionally, every once in a while, I think that it's okay to have those sort of elevated move sets to advance the story of the match.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next sort of topic here. James, it wasn't on his last episode because he just did a newer episode on Monday, which, by the way, if you're in the casual community and you like AEW, he has a show, the Junkyard Podcast. It's mostly AEW based, so you can check that out. But on the episode before that, he went on, I'm going to call it a rant for lack of better terms, about casual fans, and more so was aimed towards the CWC, casual wrestling community, and called us, in his words, hypocrites because we claim to be casual fans while he believes that we are hardcore. Now, I believe that entire video was entirely based on a misunderstanding of the word casual. So the question that I believe words mean things, and before you can have an opinion, you should have a clear definition of the words you're using. So with that, what does a casual fan mean to you? And James or Cody can start.
I'll start. And so I had to look up the definition of what casual meant, not from some wrestling dictionary or some urban dictionary, but from Merriam-Webster's dictionary themselves. And to be casual in anything means to be indifferent. So to me, a wrestling fan is a fan of wrestling who is indifferent to the product. They'll be the ones that watch occasionally. Maybe they're the channel flippers, or they'll watch the pay-per-views, or they watch occasionally. They're not up to date and aren't fully invested into the product. And certainly casual fans would not be of the level of fandom to have any part in a Discord group or a fantasy wrestling group or a podcast. In a sense, wrestling fans are wrestling fans. And so I don't like using the term casual fan or hardcore fan or this or that, because what that does is it puts labels and puts people in a box that I'm not a fan of. I don't like dividing the fans based on their level of intensity or their level of investment in a product. Go ahead.
So in short, you would say the amount of time they spend watching the product is what makes them casual or not? Is that what I'm getting from it?
I would say their level of investment, because I would say I'm a wrestling fan, for a lack of a better term, more of a hardcore fan than a casual fan. Even when because I watch WWE pay-per-views, I don't watch the weekly content. I don't quite honestly care too much about the main roster. NXT's pretty entertaining, but I'm still, I would say, more hardcore because I know what's going on and I have a level of investment in the pay-per-views. And so, yeah, I think it's not necessarily how much you watch or how little you watch, but how invested you are in the product. If you have a podcast and you have 1 to 2 to 3 episodes a week solely devoted to wrestling, you have some form of investment in that podcast. If you have a Discord where you talk only wrestling, or for the most part wrestling, 50% or more of the time, then or if the Discord group's name has to do with some sort of wrestling, so the reason that you would join this is because you have some interest in wrestling, I feel like you're not casual. You have some form of investment in that group, in that sport. You don't see casual DC universe or Marvel universe fans, dressing up to the premieres of movies. And in the same right, you don't see so-called casual wrestling fans taking that much of an investment in the product.
Okay. Cody, how would you define casual?
Yeah, I would pretty much echo what James said. Casual just means that you aren't as hardcore dedicated. If it's on, it's on. You're gonna flip through it. You may watch it. You may not. You may get the pay-per-views. You may not. You're just someone who isn't going to follow it 110%. You're not going to watch every show. You're not going to buy the merch a lot. You may buy a ticket. You may not. You're just one of those people that, oh, yeah, if it's on, I'll watch it. I may pay attention, and it's not going to hurt my feelings if I don't watch next week. Or, you're just in passing, more or less. You're a casual fan, and same kind of pertains to a sports thing. I've taken a job with a minor league hockey team, and with our promotions that we're going to be doing this season, you're trying to appeal somewhat to a casual fan. How are you going to get their attention to come to a game? And then once you get them to the game, now you have to try to turn them into buying merchandise and get them to come back to more games and investing more money into the team. That's all about money and revenue. So casual person is someone who may just flip across the TV and watch it, or just someone who every few weeks watches it and just because there's something to watch, or they may like it, but they're not going to follow it religiously.
All right, so I just want to pose this though. The people who listen to my podcast have listened to. I just did an episode on what makes you casual, or in my definition. So to me, I believe casual. You can't. So words mean different things in different industries. So casual may be indifferent or in the standard way to use it, but I believe in fandom, casual, and really fandom itself is a spectrum. And so the way I explain this is you have center. Anything right of center, if we're using my example, anything right of center, let's say, is casual. The farther right you get, the more casual you are. The farther left you go, the more hardcore you are. For example, you brought up sports. I would say I'm a casual football fan, but that doesn't make me less invested in the teams that I cheer for. I don't sit here and hoot and holler and stand up. And I mean, if y'all have seen me watch sporting events, it almost at times seems like I'm not interested in the game. To me, it is a lens in which you watch the product from. So by me saying I'm casual, I'm saying that I view the product for what it is, which is a show of scripted fights put on to entertain. At the end of the day, the results mean absolutely jack shit to nobody. I know it's fake. And fans, when they hear other fans use the F word, they freak out. It's fake wrestling. It's fake fighting. And I view it through that lens. I don't let it ruin my personal life. And what we would call the IWC, or the more hardcore, are the people you see on Twitter and and TikTok who do take it super personally, the result of these fake fights. And so casual to me is the lens in which you watch the show. It isn't how much time you have invested. You mentioned, that you shouldn't have a Discord. 90% of our Discord chat has nothing to do with wrestling. We talk about food. The biggest argument we've ever had in this Discord group was over the best flavor of wings. Like literally that went on for 3 days. We talk about sports. We talk about food. We post random ass TikToks all the damn time. So we build a community, and it centers around wrestling, sure. But we have guys in there who literally are the most casual of casual. If you watch our Friday streams where we live stream SmackDown, there's a guy in there, Gossamer, the most casual fan I've ever met. I'm not going to say he's dumb, but he has very limited knowledge of the current product. to me, that's casual. But he still watches. He still enjoys it. He's still invested. He's part of the group. Would you not say he's not a casual fan?
Again, I don't like to use those labels. Again, like you said, like you're it's almost framing casual fan versus hardcore fan, like in political terms of left of center is, liberal and right of center is conservative. I don't want wrestling to be anything that divides the fan base.
It's already divided though. It's I mean, hardcore fans divide it themselves. And that's the part I think that's what makes wrestling interesting, is that we have the ability to have 1,000 different opinions. So because we have that ability, it's going to be divided. And there are people who are extremely hardcore and extremely casual.
I agree with that, but I don't think that the fans themselves divided and separated into categories. I think maybe it was enhanced, but I wouldn't say that it was the sole cause, because you get TV execs, wrestling producers, and execs saying, how do we get the casual fan to watch? How do we, we've already got the hardcore fan base. How do we get the casual fan to watch? So when you hear those terms, often more times than not, now you start to associate with them. Okay, well, I'm a hardcore wrestling fan because I watch every week. What's this casual stuff? And then when you keep hearing it, now you're in your head dividing what a casual fan is versus a hardcore fan, or they're not a real fan. They don't watch like I do. They don't know the knowledge that I do. They don't follow it verbatim like I do. So, why should I care about them? And they ruin my product because they don't care about it as much as I do. Not saying everybody's like that, but I think that the more times we heard those terms,
a majority of the people on TikTok are that way. If you
that's one form of social media, and I would say that Twitter X is kind of the same way too, but it's not the vast majority of that group. Anything on social media is not a vast majority of any group.
And so, I want to add as well, and apologies for interrupting over talking somebody, but I joined a Discord just for the hell of it, because specifically there's a few people that you, maybe not publicly, but privately, have called out. And so I joined their Discord group, and it's the same thing as your Discord group. They talk about wrestling. They have Discord chats about music and sports and food and other forms of entertainment. And so the thing that I was trying to get at in that podcast that you mentioned was that I don't like that we divide based on casual or hardcore. And if we can just stop dividing and just focus that we're all just fans of something and get to know each other along those lines, then maybe we can put our differences of opinion aside on every other thing and build the community without putting boxes around certain things. My favorite thing about going to WrestleMania 33 was that I sat with people I didn't know, and half the time I felt like ass because of whatever sickness I had. But, there were people there that I didn't know, and we had one shared thing in common for that week, which was we were there to watch WrestleMania, the biggest spectacle I still think of all wrestling promotions is WrestleMania. And so to have that opportunity to go to WrestleMania and watch them entertain us, like that's something that it brings people from all around the world together. And maybe it's social media and TikTok and the rise of so-called Wrestle Talk, like that has divided us, but I don't think that should be a thing. And I'm not specifically saying that casual fans are to be the most responsible. I know there's groups, on each side of the aisle that have their problems, and it's a thing that they both have to, come to agree to disagree on some things, and let's come together and work things out, But to say, to paint with the broadest of brushes and say the entire IWC is this way or the entire casual fan base is this way, I don't think it's fair. I think we're all wrestling fans at the end of the day, and you hold your opinion on however you want to hold it. The greatest thing about wrestling is that there's differences of opinions and 35 million different flavors of how you can enjoy the product.
Right. So I think what you're failing to recognize, though, is that it is human nature to divide ourselves. We, by nature, go to groups that think and look just like us. And so we're not going to ever just come together. It's never going to happen, no matter how much peace we try to talk. It is literally in our nature to divide ourselves. So with that, we'll move on. Those were two questions. Those were only two questions I put in this list. Most of the rest of the questions are come from our great friend in the CWC, DJ Wavy D. Appreciate you for being basically my executive producer again, because you write all the questions that I fucking talk about every week. So his first question he has for you is, again, this is written from his words. From the outside looking in, I would say that MJF and his ability to tell stories on a week-by-week basis is the best thing going on. And again, this is from someone who doesn't watch AEW. Would you agree with this statement? Why or why not? Whoever wants to go first.
I would say that MJF is the best overall entertainer on a week-to-week basis, and I think that that's different from or I would say that he is the best overall entertainer on the roster, and he typically has one of the best segments each week on TV. But I don't think that he is the best thing in AEW. I think that it's obviously it's every person's opinion. It's up to the person's prerogative on what they find is great. Some people may love the CM Punk stuff right now. Some people may love the FTR stuff. Some people may love the Jericho stuff. To me, there's a few things that I really enjoy right now in AEW. I like the fact that you get some separate people on Collision and Dynamite. That means you kind of have to tune in on Saturdays to see who you want to watch, and tune in on Wednesdays or watch both. And I enjoy that, and I think that each show has their own unique stuff that present to the table. I do enjoy MJF. It's probably one of my more favorite people in AEW. The segments he does with Adam Cole. Been great stuff for sure. And I think that from an outsider's perspective, it probably would seem that he is the best on the roster currently. But I have other things I enjoy close to the equal of that. But that's a fair assessment, I would say.
James, would you agree with that statement?
So I kind of have the same opinion with Cody there, is that I think he's one of the most entertaining aspects of the weekly programming, no doubt. And I love the storyline of where that's going. I honestly hope Adam Cole and MJF win Saturday on Collision, win the tag titles. I think that would be just a great enhancement to the story. But again, I think it's a subjective thing about what you as an individual would consider the best part of programming. I think last week, I think the storyline with, Ricky Starks was pretty decent. I think Jungle Boy's character development as a heel is intriguing. I don't know where it's going. So it's something that's up there. A couple weeks ago, I think FTR and Bullet Club Gold put on maybe the greatest tag team match of all time. And so I think it changes on a week-to-week basis. MJF is one of the most consistently entertaining people. And again, from maybe an outsider's point of view, I can see where you can say he's, the biggest draw or whatnot. But I think that Collision altogether, in my opinion, has been a really good show, and the ratings don't necessarily follow through with how good I feel Collision has been, especially the last 2 weeks, from commentary to production to the matches that they've put on the show. Hands down better than Dynamite, in my opinion. But again, it's an individual subjective opinion that someone would have. But MJF is he's good. Him and Adam Cole, probably, I look forward to their segments. I'm looking forward to this Saturday when they fight FTR. But to say that they're the best programming, not quite. For me personally, but it does change on a week-to-week basis.
Okay. And then, well, that statement will play back at another question we have here in a few minutes. the next question is, how much stake do you personally, as a fan of AEW, hold in the AEW win-loss records, especially because anyone can have any record depending on who is booking?
So I've said since the beginning, I love the concept of having a win-loss record. Now, I think AEW has shown over the past year and a half or 2 years that they really aren't as invested in the concept as they were towards the beginning. I don't know if they've updated weekly rankings every week. They used to announce it on the show, and they haven't really done it much anymore. But I think it is, if used right, a good concept. Those who are booked strong will have the best overall win-loss records. Those who aren't are going to have the lacking win-loss records, and it's a good way for you to have some sort of basis of who's going to be in the main event picture, who belongs in the mid card, who doesn't belong on TV at all, kind of thing. Especially when you compare to the way WWE has it, especially with their tag team division. There's no.
We don't have a tag team division because our champions are too busy playing fucking superhero every week and they don't defend their title. And now they're hurt. Anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, but again, maybe if there was some structure to set it off, maybe you would have a better tag team division. I think it's a good way to just paint a picture of who the top tag teams are at this point, who are the mid-card tag teams, and who are those maybe having to work their way into the mid-card for each division. And it's just a good basis to see what teams are going. And obviously, there have been issues with AEW's, weekly rankings and things where someone who wasn't ranked in the top 5 the week prior wins one match and then jumps up to number 1 contender, and there's really no basis for that explanation, or an explanation for why they're there. And so it's difficult, but if it's done properly and there's a care to using the concept, I think you can still have those booked to win a lot, be in the main card, just like if you didn't have the concept anyway. But it's a good way to make it feel like a sports centered product. We know it's entertainment, but if you're pushing for a sports centered concept, then the win-loss record is a good way to build that.
Cody, your thoughts on it?
Can you repeat the question just one more time?
Yeah. How much stake do you personally hold in the AEW win-loss records, especially because anyone can have any record depending on who is booking the show?
What does that mean? Who's booking the show?
So, for example, and I'm glad you asked this. For example, and I didn't write this question, so I'm assuming this is what he meant. Let's say we created a promotion and we were going to use win-loss records. And 1 week, I was going to do the booking. The next week, James was going to do the booking. Or 1 month I did the booking. The next month, James did it. And for a month, I had the guy that I wanted to win all the time win. And then James says, no, he's not good enough. We're going to have him lose. Because essentially the question is asking, because we know that there's someone writing the show, how much stake does that? So I'll go ahead and say it. I don't like the idea. Here's why. If you have wins and losses, like James said, if you're going to focus on sports, and it's not sports. Like I already said, to most people who are outside of the industry, if they look in at AEW and act like it's real, they know it's not. Everyone, I don't understand why we try to keep up this idea that it's real fighting. And so I think, the booking is more important than who's winning. And of course you want people to be strong and to win, but I don't think their win-loss. For example, Kurt Hawkins went 200 matches without a win. However, if I decided to change that booking and to have him win the next 20 matches, he could be number 1 contender, but still be 20-200. So,
well, the AEW style would be your record would go back to 0-0 at the end of every year. So they don't keep track of since the beginning of AEW. It's just a year-to-year thing.
Well,
they have an all-time record.
They will do the overall record, but yes, they typically will do restarts every year. I mean, they still keep up with the records. They still show it on TV. I guess my main, let's say, problem, but I guess whenever you label out that question, I guess when it put the term depending on who's booking, to me, it made it seem like the guy was insinuating that there's different bookers every week or every show or whatever the case, and that's not true. But I see the point. I do. It was cool to have. I mean, it is cool to have the win-loss record, to not be afraid to say this is what the guy's win-loss record is, to not be afraid to show it. I get it. It's scripted television, so shouldn't matter too much. It's a way to get the sports type fans to potentially invest into the show, to show, oh, okay, this at least makes sense. If this guy's on a 8-match winning streak, he should be a number one contender for at least some sort of title. So I can see that makes sense. In the grand scheme of things, if you are on a 13-match losing streak and then you win 4 in a row, that doesn't mean you should be automatically number one contender. But it's got its flaws for sure. It's cool to me as a sports fan to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's cool. I dig it. I can see why maybe a casual fan doesn't really matter, or even to some hardcore fans, it's like we already know it's predetermined, so it shouldn't really matter. It should be just how you book somebody, how does their booking look over a period of time that makes sense for their rise to a contendership of a title. So it's all right.
But even if we don't,
the one thing I would say, sorry, let me finish this one real quick because I know I'm going to forget it. I would say that the thing that really irked me a lot, I'm glad it's gone, was the fact that they had Dark and Elevation. And for most casual fans, they did not watch it. So you could be 1-0 on Wednesday, and then you come watch next Wednesday, they're 4-0 because they've had 2 or 3 matches on different shows. And you're like, when the hell do they have a match? I didn't watch it. What is this? So, which is a ploy to get people to watch it. It just didn't work. Not enough people cared and watched it. And so it's like, I wish that wasn't part of it. I understand why, but if they just had Rampage, Dynamite, Collision, make more sense. It'd be a little bit easier to follow.
So you did take that. So I did. That was going to be one of my things against it. Is you would have someone who they would bring in and do like 10 matches on Dark, and they would go like 10-0. Like I'm pretty sure that's how they booked Athena when she first got there. If I remember correctly. Like I said, I don't really watch all that much, but you can go start like 10-0 and beat like squash talent, and then come on the main roster or Dynamite and expect me to care that because you beat 10 people in squash matches that I should care about you. But the second thing I have against it, and so like even in like UFC where they do their rankings, if there's someone who's ranked like 10th and he goes on like a 3-fight streak where he wins and he just dominates his opponents, maybe wins fight of the night a couple times, and he starts getting hot, even if he's only 5th in the rankings, he could still become the number one contender for that title because of the hot streak he's on. I'm fine with that. So I'm actually leaning more towards the side of win-losses should start to matter. But when you're in the entertainment business and you're trying to make it sports-based, I think there's a line that where it becomes blurred to where
it's convoluting.
Right.
It's too much to keep up with, especially as a booker, let alone a viewer, that you're blurring too much lines. You're just convoluting things, and it's just getting really tangled and stuff that
I would understand having it in the 80s when the whole, where the internet didn't tell us everything that happened. Fans in the 80s, I've always said I wanted to be a fan in the 80s because for the most part, they didn't know it was fake. Most people, I mean, I'm sure that there were those who figured it out. But for the most part, the workers themselves did everything that they could. It was literally their job to keep the secret of wrestling a secret to where the fans didn't know about it. Whereas, like you said earlier, you have the people like Meltzer and Alvarez and Wade Keller, it's literally their job. They made a lot of money exposing the business, and the back behind the curtain parts that happen. We're gonna move on to the next question, and I'm kind of hesitant to even bring this fucking shit back up. I thought we got rid of this a year ago, but these guys want to know your guys' thoughts and reaction to the CM Punk and Elite drama, the fallout as of today, and then ultimately whose side, if you pick sides, whose side are you on? I already know where James is going with this, so let's go ahead and get this out of the way.
See, that's where you assume, Brenna. I think you're going to assume wrong. I think both sides have their fault in the issue. I'm not here to completely defend the Elite. I think they could have de-escalated the situation, but instead I think they escalated it to a point to where shit happens. But I also think there are parts of the story that, for legal reasons or whatever, we're not being told the whole truth about what went on in that locker room. And honestly, I don't think as a fan it's any of our damn business what happened in the locker room. Here's a couple things that I do know. This isn't the first time that CM Punk has started backstage drama. He's an asshole. There are several people and several different companies that he's worked for that has said that he is a cancer to many locker rooms. That's well known. But also at the same time, the Elite aren't faultless. Again, they could have de-escalated the situation. I'm in the middle. I don't know the truth. I don't know what happened. And there are things that, for legal reasons or whatever, we're not prone to know as a fan with no knowledge. And so I can't make a full judgment on who's in the right and who's in the wrong if I don't know the full story behind it. So I'm just in the middle here. The difficulty I have with this situation is it involves people that are coming towards the end of their AEW contract. And the longer that this sits and goes and just sits here and goes unresolved, the more I think we could lose someone like Adam Hangman Page. Because why would he resign when he could just make his money in WWE and be part of a locker room that isn't full of drama? Now, I've heard from sources, I don't know how true these are, that the talk of AEW's locker room being as divided as they say it is isn't necessarily true, that it's just something that's being blown out of proportion. But at the end of the day, let's just get rid of the whole situation. Let's not bring it up anymore. It's in the past. It's been about a year ago. It's done and over with. Punk is rocking and rolling again on Collision. And as far as I understand, he won't have to deal with the Elite or a Hangman or any of them. And so let's just split the roster among those divisions and do what we have to do to keep the peace and make sure that the product overall is sustainable so we don't have issues like we did towards the end of last year where Tony Khan is literally having to change months and months of booking because of this incident. And I think that was really the downfall of Dynamite losing. We had that streak the summer of Punk last year where we hit 1 million like 12 times in a row. And then Punk, gets part of this drama, and then the storylines just start to fall apart because what was booked can't be booked anymore. And I think we're starting to regain that momentum, especially with Collision. I think the numbers came out. Collision this past week was close to 650,000, which I think might be one of the best Collision since its debut episode. Leads me to believe, I think if we put Collision on Wednesday and Dynamite on Saturdays, I think both shows would do better overall. Both time slots would have better rankings, but I don't care. It's a story in the past. Let's focus on building the company and making it a better company. As long as Punk's not doing shit in the back, and as long as the Elite doesn't, escalate situations past their boiling point, it happens in every locker room. It happens in every office where there's just drama. It's just part of the workforce. Let's just get over it and continue to enjoy the wrestling that we come to enjoy every week.
Cody, where's your thoughts on this situation?
The whole thing was unnecessary. Both are at equal fault, and they just need to grow a pair, talk it out, move on. I'm tired of hearing about the legalities crap. Being a Commanders fan, the word legal legalities, attorneys makes me want to puke. So, having all that go on during the summer of last year, especially with all that was going on with my football team, that it sucked. It sucked. And like James has said, Tony Khan book stuff in months in advance. He tries to do the best he can with having a good plan in place for booking, and it had to get changed on the fly every single week. Nothing flowed, and the fall was forgettable because of the fact of what transpired. And give kudos to John Moxley for basically putting the company on his back for 5, 6, 7 months, being the world champion and just being there every week. He was supposed to take him on vacation. Had to cancel that because Tony Khan needed somebody to rely on, and I'm sure Jericho was there to rely on, but it was Moxley that needed to carry the torch for the world champion side of things, and that's what happened. Tony Khan had to know who he was signing with Punk. It's not a secret. He is that asshole. He is that ego, very hard, stubborn guy to work with. I'm sure anybody could have told him that has worked with him in the past. And if any of the EVPs or if anybody really had a big problem with this, they should have all talked before the signing would have happened and said, listen, we don't want what happened. We don't want this to happen. Let's just stay on the same page. Let's work this out, make sure everything's going smoothly. If you have a problem, open door policy, come, let's talk. That goes, that's, I try to look at it as me. If there's somebody that legitimately has a problem with me, I hope they have the balls to at least come and confront me about it. What's your problem with me? What's your beef with me? Let's squash it out. And that's all there is to it. If you don't have enough courage and balls to be like, hey, listen, I don't like the way you talk. I don't like the way you do things. Here's why. Let's talk about it. And then at that point, you can either agree to disagree, or we can hopefully get on the same page and move on. And that's all there is to it. Just be adults. That's all it is. Yeah. The whole thing was unnecessary. It was bullshit. It shouldn't have happened. And, legality part, to me, is just a cop-out to say that you don't want to talk to the guy. Move on. Just talk it out, move on. That's all there is to it.
So to expand a little bit more on this subject, I really don't like talking about it. It sounds like you guys don't. I'm with you guys actually, which is surprising. I think both sides are at fault. Everyone, it's a fucking workplace. Everyone has to clock in and be adults at one point. And so here comes my issue though, that I don't know if people have actually thought about. James said split the rosters. You can't. You have to give the fans something, and this has to lead to a feud between the Elite and Punk and FTR. That to me that has to be the result. And James, you mentioned on your show on Monday you don't have anything booked for All In. This would sell tickets. I know you guys are selling historical amount of tickets right now for All In. If you would book this match, 6-man tag, Punk and FTR versus the Elite, you would probably have 1 million people outside the stadium just trying to get in to watch that match. My problem with splitting the roster is it's childish. If the Elite and Punk can't be adults and work together, they should not be work. They shouldn't be there. If you can't be adults, one of them has to leave. You can't have peace when there's obvious tension in the lot, to where at Forbidden Door they had to be on the complete opposite side of the arena. That's childish, and that creates a bad locker room, and you're going to lose people that way. There are going to be people who don't want to have to be on eggshells because Punk and Elite are in the building together and they don't know what's going to pop off. What happens at the next pay-per-view when Collision, and then I've always said this, you could lead it to an actual event where if you want to split the brands, you could create an entire event, Battle of the Brands, where it's Collision versus Dynamite. And again, it leads to Punk versus Omega or something along that line. My problem is right now is you have a bunch of children in that locker room, and we'll get to this idea of you have children as your executive vice principals or who president principals, all the same fucking thing. Your EVPs are children. And I hate to say it, but that's how I feel about now. Punk's childish as well in how he's handled it. And it's high school drama that didn't have to happen if people would just grow up and be adults. I mean, there's people I work with that I don't want to work with, but you do it because it's your job. I'm sure everyone feels that way. We'll move on to the next question. We're going to have to split it into 6A and 6B. I think that's going to be the easiest way to do this. So it's what are pros and cons of AEW and WWE? So let's start with the pros of each as well, James, Cody. What are some pros of WWE and AEW? I like this question because it forces y'all to praise a company that y'all don't really praise all that much. Go ahead, James.
That's not fair. Anyways, I think the biggest. So when I looked at this question, I gave one pro and one con for each segment. So for biggest,
both have a con in it. All right,
that was good. Credit on that one. That was good.
So my pro for WWE is I feel like they have a more defined main event picture than AEW has. We know who at the end of the day who's going to be main eventing every
before you move forward, since you bring up the idea of the main event picture, and this is my show, WWE, can we stop having 4 main events booked for each show? Not every match can be the main event. If you don't know, SummerSlam has 3 matches being booked as the main event. Seth and Finn, Cody and Brock, and then Jay and Roman are all considered the main event because words don't mean shit anymore in WWE. Anyway, continue.
Anyways, but yeah, so you know who your guys are in WWE who are going to main event your pay-per-views, whether that's Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes or there are defined main eventers in WWE and defined mid-carders in WWE. In AEW, you don't really have that. One pay-per-view, you'll have the so-called 4 pillars of AEW main event your show for the world title, and then the next show, like 3 of them probably won't even be. They'll probably sit in the mid card, all 3 of them. Obviously MJF as your world champion will be your main event guy, but there's no, I guess, cap on who can be a quote unquote main eventer in AEW, whereas WWE, you have a defined main event picture. Now, my pro for AEW is, I actually had 2. I'm sorry. I think they have the best tag team division in the entire industry. FTR, Bullet Club Gold, The Acclaimed, just to name 3, the Young Bucks, Lucha Bros. Rush has finally signed with AEW, so now we'll get La Facción Ingobernables back. We talk about trios, House of Black, like just so much talent in their tag or trios division. And then a second smaller pro is that AEW actually allows wrestlers to get over organically, and they don't get punished for getting over organically with the fans. LA Knight. But anyway, yeah.
Hey, if we're going to believe what everyone else is telling me, we just got to be patient on it. Which is funny you bring that up because
Well, yeah, we got to be patient with Cody too, as he becomes Stardust in a couple months.
Hey, no, y'all, no, you really do got to be patient with that push though, because he's beating the Beast, and then, well, we don't know where he's going from there because we got 6 months, so he's gonna beat Roman at Mania 40. That's my prediction, and I'm not wrong on this. Anyway, Cody, what is a pro that you have for each company?
I try to keep it a little bit shorter and sweet. For me, AEW has a better focus on the wrestling side of things. And to me, they have just a better overall emphasis on the tag team division and tag team wrestling. Whereas WWE, their pro is they just got the better overall entertainment storyline factor into it. Not every storyline is 100% perfect, nothing like that, but just in general, it's usually pretty easy to tell who's fighting who, and the storyline's building up to that. And they've had the better use of their women's roster, even sometimes it's very repetitive. I'm more into their women's matches and main events and title pictures than I am with AEW's, because it seems like, even with 5 hours of TV, we still barely get the women on the shows, and that's just really irks me. That's a big con for AEW for me, is the use of the women's division. Still, we have 2 titles and may get 1 match on the card, and I understand that you have more male than female talent, but you have a secondary title in the women's division. I understand you have the tag and the FTW and the international and the TNT, and I get it, but in the trios in the world title. But at some point, man, you just gotta. If you're not devoting the time to it, it ain't gonna happen. You have 2 hours of Collision, 2 hours of Dynamite. Give the women 45 minutes, at least one of those shows, and it ain't that hard. It really isn't. And to me, it's simply that AEW, to me, just convolutes things that shouldn't be convoluted. The TBS title should be on TBS. TNT title should be on TNT. It's not this hard. I don't understand why we need to put a Chris Statlander TBS title match on Collision on TNT. Doesn't make sense. But the Wardlow, the TNT champion, or whoever the hell is the TNT champion, Luchasaurus and Christian Cage, keep them on TNT. Don't put them on TBS. And the whole brand split thing, it is what it is. And that kind of helps you do that. But to me, it's like it's written right there. Just do it. I mean, yeah, maybe it's the fear of missing out of putting somebody on a Dynamite. It is what it is, man. You just got to move on. The women's title can be on maybe both, or every other week put them on the other show. TBS title needs to stay on TBS. TNT title needs to stay on TNT. You have enough men's champions and men on your roster as is. It ain't gonna overconvolute that. But yeah, hopefully that made sense with my pros and cons.
Absolutely, James. What are some of your cons since?
Yeah, so for WWE, I think they're booking stories longer than they need to be booked. I've talked about this before. I think the Bloodline story has gone on for entirely too long.
Nah, bro, this is cinema. Come on.
To the fact that I would consider myself a hardcore fan, and I'm bored with the story. I just want it to fucking end.
You're the only person in the world bored with this story. And I hate to break it up to ruin your night, but it's gonna continue till Mania, so don't expect this to end next week.
Fucking dumb, but like same thing with the Judgment Day. I think they just need to break them up as well. I know Dom is hot, but like have him turn. They just need to make the fucking turn with Finn and Damian happen already. Stop fucking teasing it every week. It ruins the effect of the turn. Because
it's gonna make it so much better when it happens, though. Those guys are not breaking up. They are the hottest thing on the roster right now. They're not getting rid of them.
Yeah, well, it's gone on for way too long. You have to change something or add somebody to it, or like what happened to JD joining? What happened to Dragunov joining? Like all of these rumors happen and then they don't happen.
If you listen to anything that comes out of the rumor mill, you're a fucking idiot. By the way, JD got that's not happening, and the Dragunov rumor was to join Imperium, which I think will happen at SummerSlam.
But Con for AEW, Cody kind of already mentioned it, and I mentioned it in my last episode of my podcast entitled If I Was Tony, talking about what I would do to change AEW. Women's wrestling should matter, and it doesn't to AEW. They are the most utilized division in the entire industry. I think AEW, if you look between NXT, WWE, and AEW's women's rosters, you have a just that on paper, not on the booking, you have a case to say that AEW may have the most talented women's division in the entire industry, and they're just not being used. And I made a suggestion that because there is a rumor that Dynamite becomes 3 hours long, at some point within that 3 hours, the women should get at least an hour of that show. Because like Dynamite this last week, I think Britt Baker versus Kayla Sparks was the only match on the show, and it lasted 2 minutes. And then we get Sky Blue versus Taya Valkyrie in a 5-minute match, setting up Britt Baker versus Taya on Collision. Like, we have so many talented women's wrestlers. You could build an entire women's only show out of the people not being used in AEW's women's division. And
So
the second con I have of AEW is sometimes their build up to the pay-per-view stories takes so long. And I know sometimes, you have 16 episodes that you have to build before your pay-per-view, and you don't want to give us the story on episode 1. But sometimes we don't get these stories till episode 14, and we have 2 weeks of build-up for a pay-per-view match, and there's 14 episodes underutilized to build these stories. We're what, a month or so away from All In, and we have 0 confirmed matches, I think. So it's your biggest show. We don't even know what the pay-per-view if it's going to air on in the States at this point. We got to get some more info. There was a rumor that it would be, but it hasn't been confirmed by AEW. I think Andrew Zarian confirmed that, but AEW hasn't said anything specifically about it.
Can y'all just confirm Goldberg versus Ryback, please?
I will not watch that fucking pay-per-view. That son of a bitch Ryback shows his face in AEW.
Now that I got to catch my train of thought back after that. Stupid. James, so you mentioned the women's division, and I want to just bring this side conversation just quickly, and your thoughts on this. So I listened to what you just said there, and then I actually listened to your full episode on Monday. And the first thought that came to my mind was, like Cody said, if you're not going to use it, it's not going to get better. But second, you just mentioned you can make a whole show out of unused talent. Is not the solution then to trim the fat of the roster? There are people on your roster that don't get used. Get rid of them. There's no reason to hoard and I think both companies, WWE and AEW, have way too big of a roster to just have talent just sitting there not doing anything. Like, how many of you knew that Eric Young got released back in April? I mean, you may have known, but I had no fucking idea until he showed back up. Which, first off, they didn't even explain how the fuck he came back to Impact. He literally got stabbed to death on his ending episode last year, and he just pops up as Team Canada again. So Impact, you got to fix that. Yeah, I think at both companies have to cut the fat. There's way too many wrestlers not on the rosters doing nothing.
I think to the contrary, we just need to give them more time.
But
that's why I would suggest a women's only pay-per-view to give your women the time.
But with your show, if it's match oriented, which is what your show is built to, all your TV shows are match oriented, where you have longer matches than WWE does. And because of that, what match are you going to take out to add more women's time? You're going to cut the men talent, which bring the viewership, because it's statistically proven that men's wrestling provides larger ratings than women's wrestling.
However, there have been times on AEW shows where the women's segments may have peaked more so. And it's not every week, and it may not even be in most cases, but there have been some cases where the women's segment match may not been the highest segment, but it peaked very well.
Right.
So I think it just depends on.
And so if we just start cutting the unused talent in the women division, you literally would have Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter, Tony Storm, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it.
Right. So I think the issue with AEW's women's division.
I'm not saying cut all of them, but does Emi Sakurai or whatever the fuck her name was? Does she still show up? No.
Every now and again. She'll show up in Raleigh on August 12th for DPW to defend the DPW Women's Champion.
Right. So the problem is you have too many people who are not, because you are non-exclusive. 90% of your roster does other things, and so if she's booked to be in Raleigh on a Saturday and she can't go to an AEW show where they could book her, why is she on your roster? I know people complain about WWE not allowing their talent to do indie shows or other promotions if they're not being used, but there's a reason for that. It's because if I'm trying to think, Cedric Alexander, if Cedric Alexander is needed, he's not booked by another show. It's so that even though he's not being used, if they decided to change their mind about him, he's available. Whereas how many people on your roster would rather work the indies because their booking fee? If I was an independent wrestler and I was signed and I'm all elite and I get my little poster posted on their Twitter page, my booking fee's going up. And then I would rather work the indies and work 4 shows a weekend than say, Tony, I know you don't have anything planned for me. I'm not going to be available because I'm taking bookings every weekend for the rest of the year, because that's how you make more money that way. So I think if you're going to have people who would rather do the indies, let them run the indies.
I don't agree with this cutting talent just to cut talent. I think the answer should be you have to open up the avenue for these women to be used more, and that's why I'm like, you got to give them more time.
I'm not disagreeing. You more time should be needed, but you have like 40 women on the roster, and how many of them are actually available every single week of the year?
I don't think the answer is 40. I think we maybe have 20 or so women that are like legitimately AEW.
But that's my other thing too, is you bring in these, like, I'm fine with having like enhancement talent, but you'll bring the same enhancement talent back like 4 weeks in a row and then magically sign them. But that's taking time from people already on the roster for them to just lose a match. Like Action Andretti, I'm sure he's a great person. How many matches did he have to have on AEW before they finally signed him?
Well, I think he was signed before he had a match. They just played storyline to where he beat Jericho in his first match, and then he was officially signed. But Jericho vouched for him to be signed before their match. So he didn't even have to have a match. But yeah.
Well, we'll move towards the next question. Do you think that AEW lacks overall storytelling or reasoning across their weekly show on a week-to-week basis?
I think it's kind of been part of the answer that I said, that there's a slow build to a lot of these stories. I've always said that Tony Khan is at his best of booking stories when he has about 4 to 6 weeks before a pay-per-view to start booking stuff. And so I think this is a scenario where Warner Brothers maybe knows about, maybe can see this as well. And that's maybe why they want 12 pay-per-views as this next thing. And that would give Tony Khan, especially with the way that I had, if you listen to my last podcast, you wouldn't have an AEW pay-per-view every month. You would have 12 pay-per-views. 4 of them are ROH. 6 of them are AEW exclusive, and then you'd have a women's only Forbidden Door with AEW and Stardom talent, and a men's Forbidden Door with AEW and New Japan talent. And so you could book it to where you have an AEW pay-per-view every 2 to 3 months with an ROH pay-per-view and then one of the mixed roster pay-per-views. And so it gives each show 2 months or so to build to the next pay-per-view. And that's right in Tony's wheelhouse to book better stories. I think this could be a case to where having more pay-per-views may be beneficial long-term for storytelling. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but I agree. Tony Khan sometimes takes 10 weeks to put a story together, and in those 10 weeks, he's putting on great matches, great, you can call them dream matches, but there's no progression to a story, and you're not going to keep people invested if there's no story behind these. I would agree with you on that. And so, I'd say give him 4 to 6 weeks to build a story for pay-per-view to pay-per-view, and that fits him right in his wheelhouse.
Cody?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with James on that. I think sometimes, yes, so it's just you have too deep of a roster and not enough emphasis on some of the storylines, and then it's a week and a half, sometimes week of build of a storyline. It's like sometimes I get really frustrated sometimes when we get to the pay-per-view week of a pay-per-view and we went from having maybe 4 to 6 matches and it's like, okay, that's all right, to magically 9. And it's like, dude, listen, I'm not trying to have to, spend 5 hours watching a pay-per-view. I love AEW. I will watch the product, but my goodness, man, how do you go from having, I think Revolution was built up, or even Double or Nothing was built up pretty good. We had a solid 6 or 7 matches that were booked at least 3 weeks out. I was like, man, all right, this is pretty good. And then, you throw in the casino thing. All right, well, now we're up to 8. And then magically we got to 10. It's like, bro, we don't need all these matches. What are you doing? And I mean, it turned out fine. The show was fine, but sometimes it's just too much booking, too much, hey, we got to put everybody on the card, too much, whatever the case may be. And it's like, if you just emphasize these storylines, and I understand that you're going to have your A storyline, which is the main event, your B storyline, your C storyline for your women's stuff, your mid-card stuff. But I mean, you got to have emphasis for each act going into a pay-per-view weeks in advance. You just can't sell me on a match or a storyline a week or 2 out from the pay-per-view and expect me to be like, I care more about that, or I care just as much about that than the main event. And I mean, that's not always going to be the case. Not every match is going to have the same type of emphasis and stakes as the main event. But you got to at least make me believe that there's some legitimately good reason why this match is on a pay-per-view. Why am I buying this pay-per-view versus just waiting for the results and watching on Dynamite type of thing? Make me want to buy the pay-per-view. So,
well, even Forbidden Door, the buy-in was booked up until I think the night before with 1 buy-in match, and I think they ended up having 3 because on Collision they had booked 2 extra matches or something like that. So you're going to give me 24 hours to really, feel invested. And I know that's buy-in matches, but still, why should I turn on YouTube to watch this buy-in for these matches that I have less than 24 hours to really understand why they're fighting?
So since you mentioned, this is another question not on your sheet, but was asked in the community, do you think AEW will have a Forbidden Door with other companies other than New Japan? Maybe like a Triple A,
No.
maybe like Pro Wrestling Noah, GWC?
No. And I think the reason why is I think Tony Khan has burned a lot of bridges, especially with Joey Janela, who runs Game Changer, Pro Wrestling or whatever, GCW. They're them working with New Japan hurts some of the Mexican promotions. There's beef between those companies. I think Tony Khan is okay working with just New Japan. I think they could eventually, and I think the plan was before Mercedes Moné got hurt was to have her fight at Forbidden Door, and I want to expand the Stardom relationship there. But no, I don't think. Quite honestly, I don't think it is of much value for some of these other companies than it is value-wise for New Japan to have a show with AEW.
Cody, your thoughts on that?
It'd be cool in some ways. It's not just so much NJPW and AEW, which is still very marketable, very cool to have that. You still can get dream matches for sure. So it is marketable and appeases people, sells out shows, gets great buy rates. So it is very cool to do that. Eventually, it's going to run its course, and you're going to have to do something different. Whether you try to get another promotion and market 3 of them, that's going to be tough because of whatever beef maybe a company has with another one, especially with one of the Mexican companies versus NJPW. If you try to get maybe an Impact versus AEW versus NJPW, that would be cool. You might be able to mix and match it a little bit depending on the beef and this and that and who's contractually okay to wrestle with this promotion or whatever. But it is a cool idea to do. I like it. It is a little bit different. You get to those type of dream matches that is to me is allowed and okay, but you got to do it to where it still feels fresh and not so used up that nobody cares about it.
All right, so we'll move on. The next question comes with what does AEW need to avoid to stop from becoming the next Impact Wrestling? The writer of the question states, I personally feel TNA had everything going for it and was on the verge of becoming a real threat to be a formidable number 2 to WWE, and then Dixie Carter and Hogan tore the company down. So what does AEW need to do to not have that happen?
So I think Impact Wrestling did have everything going for themselves before they tried to go head-to-head with Monday Night Raw. That was a dumbass decision. And number 2, another dumbass decision was Dixie Carter telling the Spike TV executives that Vince Russo was working behind the scenes and providing input into the product. Spike TV essentially at that point pulled out of their TV deal. That fucked up.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong though. But didn't WWE join Spike and basically create it like a lawsuit saying like what they're doing to MLW now, to where Impact couldn't be on Spike because WWE wanted exclusive rights to it? Or was that after? I don't know TNA, but that's what I was under the assumption happened there.
So I think Spike was already getting ready to pull out because of all of this. Spike didn't want Russo being involved in the show. And Dixie Carter fucked up and in an email told the executives that Russo was providing input. And through a series of things, they lost that TV deal. And then you see where they're at now. I think they're on Access Television. Like, not everybody gets that. And I love Impact Wrestling. I think they have some really good, talented people in that company. But I'm not going to pay $8 to watch all their products on their Impact app. Same reason, like I don't even have Honor Club. I'm not going to pay for Ring of Honor. And so when they don't have a big TV deal, that's why Impact kind of fell off the map a little bit. I think AEW won't follow that route because we've seen that they've built a good relationship with Warner Brothers Discovery. Now, I guess the question has to be, how loyal is Warner Brothers to AEW? Because rumors are, after the SmackDown deal with Fox is over, Warner Brothers may want to get SmackDown. And so we may have another situation to where AEW gets pushed out. I don't see it that way. Plus, you have Tony Khan, who essentially has an open checkbook to do whatever he wants with the company. And Warner Brothers Discovery is using their own investment and their own developers are building a mobile game for AEW. I don't think Impact ever had that much investment by any TV network to build a company or to build for the company, I think Warner Brothers is in good hands with AEW where they're at. And so I don't think they become an Impact Wrestling. They may not become number one. I think WWE may still hold that and may always hold that number. But I don't think they'll just like fall off the map where to where Impact was, several years ago, where their biggest pay-per-view of the year was in some bum-ass arena in Concord, North Carolina. Like I don't think AEW ever gets to that point. I think they'll still do the big stadium shows and the big arena shows, and they'll have the Warner Brothers deal for as long as Warner Brothers is invested in the product. And even if Warner Brothers drops out, I think the reputation of AEW hasn't been mired in controversy of Hogan and Dixie and Vince Russo and scandal after scandal after scandal, where somebody else would pick them up. NBC or Fox or somebody else could pick up AEW. So I don't think they go to it in the status of Impact Wrestling. Just the amount of money that Tony Khan's willing to invest into it, he will refuse to die, or he will die trying to keep that thing afloat.
So what you're saying is they're not going to put Sting and Jeff Hardy in the ring together?
Not willingly.
That's a joke on Cody because he's a big Sting fan. But anyway, Cody, your thoughts on do you agree with James? Do you disagree?
Always got to bring up that damn match, don't you? Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with that. I mean, there are so many stark differences between AEW and TNA, in my opinion. I mean, roster-wise, it seems very similar. But TNA didn't have the money, the funds, the TV deal like AEW does. TNA, I mean, AEW to me is a closer version of WCW than it is to TNA, just for the fact of the money aspect of it. Whereas, man, if any of y'all have listened to any of these wrestling podcasts, My World with Jeff Jarrett has been one of my favorites to listen to, and I've listened to all sorts of Conrad's podcasts as well as others out there like Conan's and even a couple Vince Russo ones. But man,
shit, I don't even listen to his anymore.
Well, older stuff, yeah. I wouldn't say anything newer. But
speaking of Conrad, real quick, how the fuck did he get in the Wrestling Hall of Fame?
Well, to be fair, when you're married to Ric Flair's daughter, and then you have like 18 different podcasts with people and created StarCast, I guess it revitalized wrestling in some ways where people actually like to listen to old stories.
He gave the person who runs that Hall of Fame a good interest rate on his mortgage with Save with Conrad.
Consolidated his debt, refinanced his loan. It was
he does debt consolidation. I might have to call him up.
Yeah, I mean, he does mortgages. They do. I mean, I tried that. I was like, man, I can get my credit card debt down, and I put in a thing, and the guy was like, oh, it's only if you have like a home loan, and I'm like, bro, I'm renting. Come on, man, help a brother out. He was just like, no, man, just not yet. Whenever you get a home, let me know. But anyways, yeah. With Jeff, and I mean, I'm not going to go down the entire history, but I mean, Jeff pretty much put his entire life savings into that company, and the whole background with TNA is so wonky and weird, and had a lot of backstage stuff and people that lied and skeeved. And I'm not even talking about the Russo stuff. They had a loan from a reputable company to help fund the shows, as well as with their savings. And then they had a guy with in-demand pay-per-views, and TNA ran a weekly pay-per-view every week. And then that guy lied to them about the numbers and faked it. Literally, if you have 6 to 8 hours to listen to a podcast, listen to the My World with Jeff Jarrett on every part of him creating TNA. Fascinating, really fascinating stuff. But anyways, even though there are wrestlers that are on the roster actively who are wrestling and I'm not trying to get ahead of the questions, but I think that Tony Khan is enough of a the buck stops with me in some instances, not every instance, obviously. But I don't think he knew about the whole Punk All Out thing, so I'm not even going to blame him on that. But I'm not saying Tony Khan is a Vince McMahon, but literally, while they have some creative freedom, he ultimately has a yes or no. People will say, oh, go ask Tony, or I'll ask Tony for you, but it's up to Tony. So Jeff had somebody ahead of him with Dixie because Panda Energy, TNA sold to Panda Energy. So technically, Bob Carter and Dixie Carter was his boss. Dixie evidently thought that she could, slide through the back door and get rid of Jeff, and ultimately she did because she wanted to control the company. She went from saying, I love wrestling, I love to be involved with it, let me help you not be bankrupt and save this company, to, you know what, I think I can actually book this thing. I think I know what's best for the company. And I had absolutely no idea because she didn't know wrestling. So if they made the same mistakes as TNA did, ain't no way they're going to survive 20 years like TNA has. And I don't know how in the hell they have, but
smashing pumpkins.
Even then, man, just the lawsuits between Jeff and Dixie and Russo and Hogan and Bischoff and Smashing Pumpkins, and oh my God, just so many different twists and turns with TNA, and how they've still survived 21 years is beyond me.
Let's not forget Global Force Wrestling.
Exactly. that thing lasted for what, 5 weeks, and then we went back to the Impact Wrestling brand. I mean,
I'm the king of the mountain, bitch.
It's Double J here. It's crazy. I don't think TNA will turn into that. Whole long story short, I don't think that'll happen. But Jeff Jarrett, don't buy the company, please.
He can have a match against Tony for control of the company.
Retirement match.
I swear.
As long as Tony comes out in that cowboy hat.
Hey, he did a Stone Cold Stunner to somebody on the ROH pay-per-view on the pre-show, only for the fans, not on TV. But
I was gonna say
he's training.
So Cody sort of mentioned this next question. So James, I know you have the questions up. We're gonna skip number 9 because we're running a little long here. And number 9 and number 10 are essentially the same question. Does it bother you that there are active talent that have leadership / executive positions while still wrestling? Do you fear that this could lead to the disastrous clusterfuck of an end that WCW had? James, your thoughts?
No, it's not really a concern with me, because, again, especially with these new rules that Tony Khan has laid down, that almost every aspect of every story, of every decision, even down to moveset, has to get approval from creative and producers and coaches and doctors. And I think the difference between what happened with WCW and what AEW is allowing is the people like Hogan and Hall and Nash were playing their creative freedom, card every single week and ruining good stories, good creative stories, because they didn't want to, put somebody over or whatnot. There's still some sort of structure. Cody kind of alluded to it, to where Tony Khan still has to approve, at least in some aspect, has to approve storyline. He's just not giving, you have creative freedom, but you don't have sole creative freedom. At least now they've put that structure in place. They've had a lot of things that could have gone wrong. We think about the Acclaimed in North Carolina, basically talking bad about Julia Hart. And ever since then, the Acclaimed's raps have to be approved by Tony Khan before aired live. And so, no, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think having someone like Danielson, who knows the business very well, help in creative, gives AEW better stories, because let's just be honest, before now with AEW, Tony Khan wasn't in the business. So it may have been a good story to him, but to allow people that have worked in the industry to give their feedback, I think helps the stories go better. It also allows some wrestlers who maybe don't have any creative direction to have some sort of play in the product. I know Ari Davari is acting as a producer. The one of the matches on Collision a couple weeks ago was produced by Orange Cassidy. So like allowing these people to play these other roles and not have them have to wrestle, multiple nights a week, and they can still have some play. Like Cassidy can put a match on and take a couple weeks off and put on his producer hat and recover and still be a part of the show. I think it's a good thing for the business overall. And as far as I know, Tony Khan hasn't given any character full creative control. And as long as he has some sort of structure in place, towards the end of WCW, as far as I understand, there really wasn't no structure in place. It was literally like a jungle, and the survival of the fittest, and the survival of the fittest were the people who, the Halls and the Nashes and the Hogans. I don't think that sort of endish thing is going to happen nowadays, because Tony Khan, people like to say that he doesn't have a spine, he doesn't have a backbone, but I mean there's structures in place that he's the final say of everything that goes through in that company. For every booking decision in some way has to be approved by him. So there is a structure, and I don't see it as a problem. I don't think having the Omega and the Young Bucks and Hangman being EVPs really does anything, for the on-screen production, because when they're in their on-screen role, they're just wrestlers. But knowing the business, it can help the business, on a Tuesday when there's no wrestling. Well, they have other jobs that they got to do. And so I don't see it as a problem. They just have multiple different jobs, and they're doing pretty good for themselves at those positions.
Cody, your thoughts?
So, if you don't know the answer to this question, that is perfectly okay. If you want to take a shot and assume, that would be fine. The very end of that question, do you fear this could lead to the disastrous clusterfuck of an end that WCW had leading up to the question right before that? What does that mean? What does the first question have to do with the second question? That the inmates reign that I don't know. I'm just trying to understand the whole synopsis of that entire question.
Shit, I should have kept the fucking questions up now that I didn't
Sorry.
think you were going to answer a question with a question.
Because I could go one or two ways with this, and either way, I feel like it's going to lead down a whole rabbit
Well, just
hole.
go both ways. Because I don't really know what the mindset behind the question was.
Yeah. Just kind of reading the question, it insinuates that the active talent had leadership/executive positions in WCW that led to the downfall, and that's entirely inaccurate. Hogan was not an executive producer or president. Neither was Nash, neither was Hall, neither was Flair. On screen, yes, they had strong characters. In their contracts, yes, they had creative control. I don't think that necessarily means that they were in a leadership executive role. It just means they had creative control over the character. And it means that besides Nash being Booker in 1999, and that was because Bischoff was sent home, Russo was either starting to come into the role or right before the role, and then Russo took over, and then he got tired and went home in January, and then Russo came back, and then Bischoff came back. Yeah, that whole last 2 years of WCW was a fun deal. But anyways, really besides Nash being the booker, and that was just because nobody else was there to be the booker, it was almost like, okay, who wants to be the booker? Okay, Nash, you can be the booker, because I guess he said he wanted to be that. But there was a lot of things that made the downfall of WCW, and AEW is not leaning towards that whatsoever, in my opinion. Eric Bischoff didn't own WCW, Ted Turner did. once Ted Turner bought, basically got the rug swept from underneath them by Warner and AOL Time Warner, then it became AOL Time Warner's company. And then it was basically up to the networks, the head of the networks of TNT and TBS, of if they wanted to keep the products on TV, and they did. And when Bischoff made the attempt to buy the company in 2001, they were like, yeah, you can have the company, but you can't have the TV time. So, I mean, essentially the deal was worth like maybe $5 because it was like, okay, well, you can have everything but the TV time. And I mean, by then they were locked into so much of a contract that they couldn't negotiate with FX or any other partner to get a TV deal in time before the company basically went under. So that's a whole thing. I don't know why I went down the whole history of 1999, 2000, 2001 WCW, but I guess because that's my company, I had to do that.
It's all me, damn it.
Right. So I say all that to say that this is nothing compared to that, because Tony Khan owns this company. If literally all 4 or 5 of the EVPs left, it wouldn't matter because it's still Tony Khan's company. He can still run it without them if he chose to do so. He could put new people in as those EVP roles. He still has the network deals because he himself negotiated those with Warner. Maybe it was in a way that Omega or the Bucks or Hangman had something to do a little bit with that. Maybe they sat in on a meeting. I don't know. But what I ultimately know is that this is Tony Khan's company. So Kenny Omega's not running the day-to-day stuff. Neither the Bucks, neither of Hangman Page. Nobody but Tony Khan literally can be like, I'm shutting down the company, or guys, thanks for all you did for this company. You're going to, you know what, you can do the Cody Rhodes route and go get the money. Perfectly fine with that, you guys. I appreciate you. I'll just get new EVPs. Can be that simple. And James made a point of these other guys making, being producers, and they're learning from other wrestling minds to produce, like the Dean Malenkos, like the Jerry Lynn's, and coaching and things like that. So they're trying to pay it back towards eventually when you guys can't wrestle anymore. Here might be a good idea to get your creative mind to work and be an agent, be a producer, be a writer, whatever the case may be. So I think AEW is in a much better spot than WCW ever was, simply for the fact of Tony Khan is like a Vince McMahon. Well, was. He owns his company. He can do whatever he wants with it. And at the end of the day, it's really up to him to keep it on TV or not. So
right. All right. All right. So we have one more question. I purposely kept it from you because I wanted to get your guys' raw reaction to this.
I had a feeling this was coming.
With the assumed match being at All In, being Omega and Ospreay 3, what's the possibility we get Omega Ospreay 4 in April in Philadelphia at WrestleMania?
Slim to none.
Slim to none, yeah. I think Ospreay's hasn't Ospreay basically said he won't join WWE at this point? I think Ospreay likes his spot at New Japan. He's one of the top guys and one of the most trusted guys in New Japan. But other than that, even if he were to go to WWE, they wouldn't put him in a match with Omega. Because I don't think Omega would go to WWE at this point. Plus, it's the end of the trilogy. And it would be difficult to, continue on a story. Or at least the same story that's going on now. And I think the mystique behind Omega and Ospreay is it's not sports entertainment based. We're just going to try and kill each other in the ring. And that's what the fans really love about those matches. Like, I have Ospreay Omega 2 from Forbidden Door as my match of the year right now. And it's going to be really hard to beat that. And I see you smiling over there.
I'm just smiling because of what my match of the year is. I'm not going to say it because we'll have to get together for that match of the year podcast or the yearly awards like we always do. But with that, I want to thank you all. It's been a lot longer than I thought this would go. I appreciate you guys being here. James has the Junkyard podcast. I don't know when to tell you to watch it because he fucking doesn't have a schedule. But
I don't have a set schedule for anything. So
so you can just check up on the Junkyard Media Group YouTube page, and whenever an episode's posted, it's posted.
Here's what you do. You go to Linktree. I don't know, is it linktree.com/junkyard media, and you can find all of my links there, and subscribe to the podcast, and you'll get updates when I freaking upload one, because I've had this podcast for about a year, and I think I'm on episode 15. So we're doing pretty fucking good right now.
It's better than me. I haven't had an episode in probably 2.5 years.
Right. Well, you could watch all three of us plus two more every Thursday night right here on the Junkyard Media Group page, as we do our sports podcast, the Calling Audibles podcast. And then for the CWC who's listening to this, first off, I'm sorry that I made you listen to a almost 3-hour long podcast, because I recorded stuff before this interview. So I'm sorry to make it the length of Cornette's podcast every fucking week, but we're not bad as his 6-hour episode I sat through of his one that took all day. But
what you can do is put on Monday Night Raw on mute and just listen to the podcast.
No, because Monday Night Raw is actually the best show right now on WWE, which is quite sad to say that. Anyway, sorry for the length of this podcast, which means, y'all, I'm not doing a Saturday show this week because I know y'all ain't got enough time in the world to listen to me talk for this long. And but with that, check out Queen City Pro Wrestling as well. I'm actually about to go and finish my editing of that, so that can be up tomorrow as well, or Wednesday, depending on when you guys are listening to this. But again, thank you to my two guests here. And again, tune in Thursday at 9 Eastern to hear us talk about this week's NIL and transfer portal. So,
I don't know if I'm in the Discord, but I may have to join it now.
I mean, if y'all want to join it, if the people who are in it, I mean, I will say this: we are on a 3-strike and you're out of here roll. We don't play no shit. So I still think James was old Jess Harvey over here, but he
I was not. I'm in one Discord. And
okay. You might be this Barney dude who, I don't know who the hell he is, but he be acting a little bit retarded sometimes. I hope he doesn't listen to this. But
what's the name of the group?
Well, you can go to the Casual Community YouTube page, and the links to join are in the in his videos. That's Notorious Nerdy D. My old buddy here. It's a good group to join if y'all want to join it. But again, like I said, it's we don't play no shit. You try to ruin the vibe of the group, I'm personally gonna kick you the fuck out of it. So, but with that, thank you all for joining, and we will see you all on my next episode, which I may do one on Saturday. Who knows? But we'll see you all on the next episode.